Thank you for joining us today as we continue our study series. I'm Pastor Jerry Burney, and this series today is on science and origins, creation or evolution. Other studies we do are on the two creation accounts in Genesis and Revelation and end times. Now, you can reach us anytime at our web, burneyfam.com, and hopefully soon on our new site, targettruthministries.com. Our ministry delivers God's truth to jail and prison inmates. And if you would like us to mail weekly studies to someone in jail or prison, please email us with their name, their ID number, and their address. We're going to resume this time in our series with the sun. And fast forward here and find the sun. There it is. Further evidence supporting unconventional science, and remember the issue is always age. Further evidence supporting unconventional science in a young age for the solar system comes from John Eddy of Harbor-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Boulder, Colorado, and Aram Bosnerzian, mathematician of S. Ross and Company of Boston, Massachusetts. And the data they put together provided science with evidence of the sun's shrinkage rate of 0.1% per century, which rules out any possibility of the Earth being very old as theorized by conventional science. In other words, the sun is shrinking each year. As it burns up its energy, it's slowly shrinking at 0.1% per century. It doesn't sound like very much, but if the solar system is 4.5 billion years old, that means in the past the sun would have been a lot bigger, because now we know it's shrinking. If the sun were only a few thousand years old, extrapolating backwards at the rate of 0.1% per century, then the sun's size a few thousand years ago would not have been so large as to engulf the Earth. In other words, if the universe, the solar system is only 10,000 years old, it's not a big deal. However, if the sun were as old as 700,000 years, and you'll recall that the solar system is supposed to be 4.5 billion years old according to scientists. But let's just say the sun is 700,000 years old. At that age, then the sun's size would have been so large that it would have consumed the Earth and several other planets as well. Now, processes within the sun are not known. Some scientists say that nuclear fission is underway right now, and some say that only gravitational factors are in effect. So some scientists are saying that there's a nuclear fission activity going on right in the center of the sun that's producing the heat. Others say it's the gravitational effects, because we know that when things are compressed that they produce heat. More recently, scientists measuring the levels of lithium and beryllium discovered that the sun has almost no lithium, which would be consumed in about 7,500 years at a temperature of 3 million degrees. Now, it's hard to follow all these figures, but scientists know that there's lithium and beryllium, and they act differently in the sun depending on the temperature of the sun and the age of the sun. So they discovered that the sun has no lithium, and lithium would be consumed in 7,500 years at a low temperature of 3 million degrees. So they know that there's no lithium, so we know the sun is probably about 7,500 years old, according to science. But the levels of beryllium would be destroyed at temperatures above 4 billion degrees, and yet they see abundant levels of beryllium. So therefore they have concluded, scientists, that the sun's temperature is below 4 million degrees and still quite young. If the sun were billions of years old, its temperatures would have to be at least 15 million degrees with a dense core and heavy nuclear activity. The sun would appear from all this evidence to be very young. Now, in the Bible, there are 3 references to it being hot and 3 references to it being cold in the end of days. In other words, when the end times for the sun comes, when it's burned up all its energies, a couple of things are going to happen. In the Bible, if you read Revelation 16, verses 8 through 9, Isaiah 30, verse 26, and Malachi 4, verses 1 and 2, there you will read in those 3 passages that the earth will end by being scorched with great fire. And if you read three other passages in Joel chapter 2, verse 30 to 31, and Matthew 24, verse 29, and Isaiah 13, verses 9 to 13, you'll read in those three passages that the earth will be dark and cold in the end of days. Some people have suggested, well, the Bible's wrong. It can't be both. But science does help us in this. This is why Einstein said you need science as well as the Bible to understand what's going on. The sun, in the case of what astronomers describe as a nova, the sun first goes dark, or first goes extremely hot for 7 to 10 days, and then it goes dark. A little slide here says the sun will go nova when its hydrogen supply drops to 49%. Dr. Joseph Shadovsky of the Shettenberg State Astronomical Institute of Moscow reports that when the sun's hydrogen supply drops to 49% and the helium content increases to 51%, that our sun will go nova. And I'll go to the next slide here. It says the sun will go nova when its hydrogen supply drops to 49%. Today, the supply is only about half gone. That's what scientists are telling us. Let's think about this for a second. Scientists are telling us that our sun should last a long time because its hydrogen supply is only about half gone. Think about it. If it's only half gone, it's pretty close to dropping to 49%. Then it would go nova. It would be extremely hot for 7 to 10 days and then go dark, just as the Bible described. Now, there are other things that can do this same kind of thing from space. A gamma ray burst, which is very deadly, is capable of doing the same thing as a nova, scorching with bright light and then going dark. Now, we have another area of science, supernovas. And supernovas are a very interesting phenomenon in space. Supernovas happen when a star ends and it blows up. Concerning supernovas, these happen because of fusion within a star it ends, and gravity causes an implosion, and then it causes gases to explode outwards. Now, scientists have categorized supernovas into three classes or stages. Stage 1, Stage 2, and Stage 3. Stage 1 supernova is a supernova that's less than 2,000 years old. In other words, it's fairly young. It happened in recent history. And we even have evidence from historians about witnessing stars blowing up, and we can see the leftovers in space today of those stars that blew up. Science has identified 5 of these. 5 of these supernova stage 1s that are less than 2,000 years old. Now, there's stage 2 supernovas, and these are up to 10 million years old. Not billion, 10 million years. Science has identified 200 of these, and of course they get the date on these from the distance they are away and how far the light has traveled away from when the supernova blew up. So they can measure that distance in light, and they say that it measures 10 million years old. They've measured 200 of those that are 10 million years old, according to their conventional understanding. Now, the interesting thing comes from looking at stage 3 supernovas. Stage 3 supernovas would be over 10 million years old. And the funny part about this is that science cannot find any. They cannot find a single supernova that's more than 10 million years old. Theoretically, if the universe is 14 billion years old, or 13.5 billion years old, science said that there should be over 5,000 that they can identify, but they haven't found a single one. So the evidence is not there for old age theories that conventional science tells us. There is evidence for a young age of the universe. We're going to take a look now at comets and the Oort Cloud and the Kuiper Belt. Comets, the Oort Cloud, and the Kuiper Belt. As we know, in the solar system, we have comets that show up every now and then. We see them in space. And supposedly these originate from something called an Oort Cloud. And this Oort Cloud is a theorized cloud of material or matter that somehow gives birth to comets, and then they come into the solar system. Now, the reason they have to have, science theorizes that there is an Oort cloud out there supplying matter to feed us comets all the time, is because Littleton in his book has identified this very well. He's estimated the maximum life of comets to be 10,000 years. And you can have long-term comets, but they could never exceed 100,000 years. So in our solar system, the comets we have going around in our solar system, the maximum, the longest life comet could exist would be 100,000 years. Yet we still see comets today. So either they're not 100,000 years old, or there has to be a source for them to come from. So the theory of conventional science is that comets come out of a distant Oort cloud. And this theorized cloud is thought to be about 50 astronomical units away. Now, an astronomical unit is equal to the distance from that light travels from a sun to our Earth, which is 93 million miles. But there's no evidence of this cloud existing. In other words, we use our telescopes, we send out probes, but we have not found evidence of any, quote, Oort cloud existing where comets could come from. Pluto, as you recall, is 39 astronomical units away. Now, Pluto used to be a planet. For those of us who were in school years ago, today it's not a planet. It's part of what's called the Kuiper Belt. Now, the Kuiper Belt is a ring of objects outside the orbit of Neptune, and Pluto is one of those. So they have reclassified Pluto from being a planet to being part of the material that's circulating around outside of the orbit of Neptune. And that Kuiper Belt is very broad, and now scientists are saying, well, perhaps on the outskirts of the Kuiper Belt, where those objects are going, there is an Oort cloud out there, another 10 astronomical units away. Now, the objects that have been identified in this Kuiper Belt are not the same objects as comets, and they do not become comets. But science is at a loss to explain exactly where the comets originate from. So this area seems plausible to them, in theory anyway. There is, of course, no evidence that this is where comets come from. But if the solar system is older than 10 to 20,000 years old, then there must be a source for all these comets still in existence today. Unfortunately, no evidence of any of these areas of comet formation can be given. All these points of origin are based on speculation. The only evidence that science can point to is that comets last for about 10,000 years and that there are some still here. So the solar system must be at least several thousand years old. But there's no evidence from these areas that the solar system is billions of years old. It's kind of like the dark matter and the dark energy. There's supposedly some dark comets out there that show up. So that's why we see them. We'll move on to another subject here. Getting closer to Earth now. Let's discuss these layers in the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is a great gift to us in science, because we can discover layers and supposedly how maybe the Earth formed, what catastrophic events went on in the past, all these different kinds of things from the Grand Canyon. And in front of me on my desk here, I've got several rocks that form out of these same geologic events. I have obsidian that forms out of a volcano, and I have, of course, this is a petrified tree here, but we have regular rock that trilobite fossil is formed in. We have these pictures of clams formed into rock here, a huge pile of clams that were, in some catastrophic event, formed into this mass along with the rock and fossilized. And we have a fossilized fish here on this piece of shale. So we have different kinds of rocks, obsidian, shale, and different kinds of rocks that form. And it's kind of interesting how we get rocks, what they mean to us as far as age goes. It's important to know all about rocks, because evolutionists theorize that our ancestors were at one time rocks. The term pet rock takes on a special meaning if one believes that once upon a time we were all rocks. In other words, we're formed from the materials of the earth. Now, this actually agrees with the Bible, because the Bible says that man was formed from the dust of the ground. So we're part of the formation of the rocks of the ground, the formation of the dirt. And science and the Bible kind of agree on this. But pet rock takes on a new meaning if one believes that at one time we were all rocks and we evolved from those minerals rather than being created. It's the difference between evolution, what they think of the natural way we came about to be, I came from a rock, or creation, I came from the earth but God did it. So, once upon a time we were all rocks and we evolved from the minerals of rocks per conventional science. Now rocks come in three basic forms. You have igneous rocks, which are from volcanoes. That was the one here. It looks like a glassy kind of thing. And the interesting thing about the volcanic rock, the igneous rock, is that they contain dating materials. They contain radiometric materials, but they contain no fossils. As you can imagine, no fossils survive in the hot lava that forms out of a volcano. But they do have the radiometric dating materials in them. Then we have metamorphic rocks, and those are rocks, they're surface rocks subject to high temperatures. And then we have sedimentary rocks, and sedimentary rocks are kind of like this one here, where through a cementing process of sediment, fossils, animals, bugs can get trapped into the material, and we can have their fossil presence there. And these rocks are formed through water deposits through a cementing process of pressure compaction. And these rocks do contain fossils, but they do not contain any dating material. So it's interesting that we have rocks that contain dating material with no fossils, and we have other rocks that contain fossils, but no dating material. We can start to see the problem already. The geologic column one sees in a college textbook, like that picture of the Grand Canyon, only occurs in one place in the world. And that geologic column occurs in the textbook. The geologic column of strata of rocks were actually identified and classified before fossils were identified and long before radiometric dating methods were developed. There are 10 basic types or strata of rock that have been identified to be used as a general guide in order to make reference to systems and types of rocks, not to age. In other words, when these layers of rocks were first identified and categorized and classified, they were to help us as we went around the world to identify different types of rocks and strata and everything. They had nothing to do with age in the beginning. Now these systems, strata, layers, they're not uniform, and they appear different in various parts of the earth. In other words, not all these layers are in uniform things around the earth. Some of these layers are on top and some are on the bottom in different parts of the earth. The geologists who developed the system of identifying the various strata theorized that a catastrophic process several thousand years ago caused various types of rock and strata to appear inverted, repeated, even inserted, and therefore not conforming to the general system of strata. In fact, data from the continents and ocean basins show how that the 10 types of strata are actually very poorly represented in a global scale. In a global scale, scientists tell us that about 77% of the Earth's surface area on land and under the sea have 7 or more, in other words 70% of the strata types entirely missing. In other words, these layers represent types of rocks. They don't represent age. They're inverted, they're in different places, a lot of them are missing in different parts of the world. They just represent different types of rock, not age. Actual evidence shows that there are no erosion marks between these layers. Now that's another interesting thing. Between the layers of rocks, you would think if they were deposited over long periods of time that you would have erosion marks, rivers, floods, rain, all this stuff that happens. Yet scientists tell us that actual evidence shows there's no erosion marks between these layers, which suggests very short periods of time between the layers. In other words, they were laid down very quickly. That's just the opposite of what scientists theorize about long ages of sediment buildup. The volcanic eruption of Mount St. Helens, the volcanic eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington State showed that dense and light compaction layers do form on top of each other as a result of flooding. In other words, when the volcano at Mount St. Helens happened, there was also a great washout of water that came with that. And with that, they saw that different layers can form. And you'll recall that Mount St. Helens didn't happen over millions of years or even thousands of years. It happened over a period of days. Anyway, it showed that dense and light compaction layers do form on top of each other as a result of flooding. For much of the last century, scientists would not accept this fact, but the evidence is now clear. Because scientists, using conventional theories about billions of years being needed to form these various layers, they therefore assigned ages to fossils found in these layers, even though the same fossil types are often found in other theoretical age layers as well. A major source of fossils is found in the Cambrian layer, and ironically, scientists can't explain why life appears suddenly in the fossil record in this layer, fully developed, fully varied, with no links between species. In other words, scientists have found that there's a certain layer of the Earth, called Cambrian layer, in which all the types of life, plant and animal, exist. Now, they haven't exactly identified every single species of every single plant and animal, but they have identified all the different types and kinds as existing within this single layer. Science bases its theories, conventional science bases its theories on ages for strata upon using only the vertebrate fossils as evidence. In other words, conventional science has decided, well, because all these things appear in the Cambrian layer, if we're going to assign ages to all these other layers, we have to find a methodology of doing that. So what they decided is they're going to identify the fossils, the vertebrate fossils only, within certain layers, and if a vertebrate fossil appears in an upper layer, then that's a younger layer. And then down below you might find plants, and you might find protozoa and other things, cellular things, and that would be an older layer. The only way they could do this was by picking vertebrate fossils. Now, the interesting thing about that is that these vertebrate fossils account for only 0.000125% of all the fossils. A very, very, very small number of fossils, which means that science is basing its theories. Science is basing its theories now on ages and strata on less than 1%, way less than 1% of the available evidence. And there again, that's poor science. That's like the 95% of missing matter in the universe. We can identify 5% of the matter in our galaxies and stars, but we can't identify what the other 95% is. So we base all of our theories on the 5%. And here in the strata and rock, we're basing all of our theories on less than 1%. Studies reported to the French Academy of Science and the European Congress of Sedimentology provide proof that strata, which run horizontal, are actually deposited by a vertical process. This is true of both coastal areas and deep seas. The horizontal is laid down from the top to the bottom vertically as the water flows. Now, this is kind of hard to understand. You almost need to see an experiment, but there are online studies that you can get and look at. The water flows. As the water's flowing, it lays down a layer, lays down a layer, lays down a layer, lays down a layer, flows some more, lays down a layer. So in other words, the layers are being laid down from top to bottom, but as the water flows, the fossils that might be laid down within those layers, the fossil that is laid down in the top layer is actually the oldest fossil. It's the last one laid down. So the layers form as the water is flowing in a flood from the bottom to the top, all at the same time. It's part of the same flood motion, the same river movement. So the layers lay down top to bottom, or excuse me, bottom to top as the water is flowing along. All the layers are forming at the same time. Now, studies of Mount St. Helens show that in one day, 600 feet of various strata were formed. In one day, 600 feet of different strata were formed. Science now knows for sure that the stratas that lay down, including the Grand Canyon, can all form in a single event, a great flood. You can get all these different layers. Recall, as we stated before, that there are no erosion marks between these layers, indicating that we're part of a single event. Now, because of all this evidence of hundreds of feet of various layers being formed in a single flood event, the fossils found in these layers often reflect the same age, whether on the top layer or the bottom layer. If you have this event flowing through and all these layers are being laid down at the same time, then regardless of where the fossils appear, they're all the same age. It's a part of the same event. Further, fossils on the top layer may actually be older than those on the bottom layer because the flow of layer formation is horizontal, meaning that the fossils on top are laid down in place before the layer being formed in the horizontal direction. In other words, you've got this layers being formed, so this layer at the top here is being formed before this next layer at the bottom as it flows this way. So the layer down at the bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top. So this top layer here, actually, even though it's the same event, this fossil is laid down before this next layer down here at the bottom. Anyway, you can get online and you can see how all those layers form. We're going to discuss stalactites and stalagmites here for a minute. Stalactites and stalagmites. Do these represent long ages or short periods of time? Now, a stalactite and stalagmites are theorized to have been formed by water dripping over millions of years. Yet in many caves, bats which have died were buried before their bodies could decay, indicating rapid burial, not millions of years. In other words, stalactites are the ones that form at the top. They're tight, meaning holding tight to the ceiling. Stalagmites are the ones that grow from the bottom. They're the ones that might grow up. That's how you determine what's a stalactite and a stalagmite. When the water drips from the top, it drips minerals, and minerals form the elements at the top, forming that column of minerals for the stalactite. And then it drips down and deposits minerals at the bottom, and they build up from the bottom, forming a cone at the bottom as well. Bats, and other things for that matter as well, have landed on the stalagmite at the bottom and been buried there. Still, you can still see that they're a bat. In other words, they were buried rapidly. They didn't decay before they were buried. This means that it didn't take millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years or even tens of thousands of years for that stalagmite to develop. It could develop in a matter of a short period of time. As a matter of fact, if you park your car in a parking garage and there's some water dripping out of a pipe, and you park your car there for the day and you come back after work and pick up your car, you're liable to find a mineral deposit right on the hood of your car from that water dripping on your car. A lot of people will choose a different parking place because of that. That's how fast these minerals get deposited. It doesn't take tens, hundreds of thousands, or millions of years for them to develop. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today in this series and series of seminars that we're doing. May God bless you each and every day, and until next time, please pray for our jail and prison ministry, BernieFam.com.